So we look at the epithelial tissue. This is the first tissue that we are looking at. Remember, we said that we are majorly looking at four types of animal tissues: connective tissue, nervous tissue, muscle tissue or muscular tissue, and then now the epithelial tissue. Okay, so every time we mention the word epithelial tissue, please remember that we are referring to covering of the body, whether it is the exterior, the outside of the body, or the internal parts of the body, or body cavities. That's all what we term as epithelial tissue. Okay, so in this session, we are going to look at what epithelial tissue is, and then the different types of epithelial tissues, and pay keen attention to the functions of this epithelial tissue and what makes them to be able to carry out those functions. That is very key. So you should be able to relate the different types of epithelial tissue to their functions. Okay, so we start. So epithelial tissue is a collection of closely packed single or multi-layered sheets of cells covering external and internal surfaces of the body. So whether we are talking about what is covering the heart or what is inside the heart, that lining, all those cells around the heart or inside the heart, or even the cells on the outside of a blood vessel, or on in the inside or the internal part of the blood vessel. That is all epithelial tissue. Any organ that you think about is lined by epithelial tissue. That's the rule. Any organ that you think about is lined by epithelial tissue. Okay, so these cells can be single-celled. That this is to say that we have a single layer of cells, or they can be several layers of cells. So like, for example, in this picture here, this is a single layer of cell. Okay, so we often use the word one cell thick, or to refer to what that single layer of what? Of cells. But if you have this layer and another layer on top and another layer on top, those are multi-layered epithelial tissues. Okay, that means that you have several layers of cells, one over the other. Okay, so what are the characteristics? If you followed my description, you might have noticed that these cells, the epithelial tissue is about cells that are covering organs, and they can be multi-layered or single-layered epithelial tissue. So that means that these cells are actually connected to one another. Remember, we earlier on talked about the fact that cells are connected to one another by what we call junctions. You can call them tight junctions, or you can call them cell junctions. Okay, so these cells are covering, but they are not existing as separate cells, but they are interconnected through these cell junctions. But you also have carbohydrate-based substances that connect these cells also. So these cells lie on a membrane that we call the basement membrane. This is basically to say that these cells are not just hanging in space. They have a basement membrane to which they actually rest on. This basement membrane is made up of collagen fibers, and we shall look at what collagen fibers are when we look at the connective tissue. Okay, so connective tissues help in connecting different, supporting and connecting different tissues and cells. So we shall look at the connective tissues and how the collagen fibers play an important role in support of these different tissues. Okay, so just basically to illustrate this, if you have this as the basement membrane, and then you have the epithelial cells lining, just like that. So assuming each of those is an epithelial cell, okay, each of that is an epithelial cell. So this is the basement membrane, and then this is the apical surface of the epithelial tissue. So this becomes the basal side or the basal surface here, and then here it is the apical surface. So just know the two. So usually on the apical surface, that's when you have structures that we call the cilia there. Okay. Epithelial tissues do not have blood vessels, so we say they are avascular. Avascular. They don't have blood vessels. That means that movement of materials across epithelial surfaces is mainly by diffusion, whether it is facilitated diffusion, whether it is simple diffusion. It's basically diffusion. So these materials enter into the bloodstream through diffusion. Okay. So also the epithelial tissue also receives these nutrients through diffusion. Okay. And then another point is that epithelial tissues have nerve endings. Okay. Nerve endings may be present. Okay. And then epithelial tissues undergo what we call regeneration. The meaning of this is that when the cells get old, they actually die off, and then they are replaced by new cells. So that means that epithelial cells undergo mitosis, such that there is a replacement of the worn out cells or the dead cells. So we basically say that epithelial cells have high regenerative capacity. Okay, this means that they can easily divide and replace the worn out cells. So we look at the different categories of epithelial cells or epithelial tissues. We look at the classification of epithelial tissues or the different types of epithelial tissue. Two main things that we use in this categorization. The first one is the number of cells, cell layers, the number of cell layers, and then the second one is the shape of cells. So we actually combine this. For example, we can say simple columnar, okay, simple columnar, as an example of an epithelial tissue. The word simple in that case means that it is a single layer of epithelial cells. And then the columnar depicts that this is the cells are actually having a columnar shape. They're like columns, okay? So they are elongated, basically. That's what it means. So let's look at this broad categorization. This categorization we are looking at here is looking at epithelial tissues using through three categories. Simple epithelium, which is characterized by a single layer. That's the key point there. Simple epithelium, single layer. And then compound epithelium, more than two cell layers or more than one layer thick. Okay. And then with granular epithelium, it's about presence of glands in the epithelium. These glands produce different secretions, sweat, saliva, and many other secretions that we shall look at. So those are the three broad categories of epithelium. So we're going to look at each of the subtypes within each main category. So we're going to look at the subcategories. And in our discussion of the subcategories, we are going to focus on, of course, the structure, the function, and how the structure is related to the function. Okay, so those are three things that we have to look at. And then the fourth one actually is, where do we find this type of epithelium? If you know where the type of epithelium is found, then you'll be in position to know this function. Actually, knowing the where it is formed, where it is found, is very important. Okay, so let's basically start that discussion. So simple squamous epithelium. Simple, that means single layer. Squamous, this basically to mean cells that are thin, irregular, and having a nucleus which is disc-shaped, found in the center. So this is a typical squamous epithelial cell. This one here. So this is the whole epithelium. So this epithelium, if you look at it, you see the cells are very flat. And then because of the fact that they are flat, they are thin. And because of that, that means things can easily diffuse across. And because things can easily diffuse, it means the organs that have that depend on diffusion to carry out their different functions will definitely have this type of epithelium. Okay, so simple squamous epithelium, thin irregular cells with a nucleus, with the nuclei that are actually centrally placed. So we find this type of epithelium in the renal capsules, in the alveoli blood vessels, especially the endothelium, and then the capillary walls, and then the lymphatic vessels. So anywhere where you need diffusion, including the alveoli, the blood vessels, especially the capillaries, okay, you need this type of diffusion. So because of that, this type of epithelium, because of that, we can say this type of epithelium is very important in gaseous exchange, but also exchange of materials. Okay. So the key thing is that it is very thin and flattened. This reduces the distance for which these materials have to move, whether it is gases, whether it is simple organic molecules, whether it is glucose, whether it is any other organic molecule, or even when it is about fluids moving. Okay, if that is tissue fluid or the renal filtrate. Simple cuboidal epithelium. The key word here is cuboidal. We're talking about cells that are having a shape that is like that of a tube. That means that all sides are equal. And again, each cell is having a cuboid shape, but the nucleus is placed in the center. Okay, in the center. Most ducts, yes, go back here. Most ducts of glands actually have this epithelial, this simple cuboidal epithelium. Okay, so the ducts of glands like salivary gland, and then the pancreas, or the pancreatic duct, and then the renal tubules and the retina all have this renal cuboidal epithelium. So if you know where they are found, you know their functions. Okay, if you're talking about in glands, then we just know it is about secretion. If we are finding it in the renal tubules, then it is about absorption, and then also excretion, and then also protection there. The other thing, the adaptation is, of course, these cells are tightly packed. Okay, these cells are tightly packed, and this offers protection here. Okay, and then they can have what we call microvilli on the apical side or the apical surface, and these microvilli are very important for absorption, and especially where do we find this? Especially in the renal tubules. Okay, especially in the renal tubules where reabsorption happens. We have microvilli. Okay, these epithelial cells also have the mitochondria that they use for energy. So the third type of epithelium is what we call simple columnar epithelium. The cells are having a structure that looks like a column, elongated basically, and then you have nuclei there. Okay, we find this in small intestines, the stomach, gallbladder, kidneys, and some glands. Okay, so it is used for absorption, protection, and secretion. They have microvilli that increase the surface area for absorption. Microvilli in the small intestine especially. And then even in the stomach, you have goblet cells that produce mucus that protects the stomach wall against the aggressive hydrochloric acid. Ciliated epithelium, it's ciliated epithelium because of these structures, tiny structures. These structures are found in the respiratory tract, the oviduct, and they are important for protection basically because they move materials. For example, remove foreign material from the respiratory tract, but also aid movement of the male gametes during the production. Aid movement of the female gamete. Okay, for fertilization, and then also some of these simple epithelial, simple ciliated. I mean, some of the ciliated epithelium have goblet cells that are important for mucus secretion. And this mucus is very important for lubrication, but also for protection. And then we have what you call the pseudostratified epithelium. Here, you're having cells that have different shapes, different heights, and this makes it appear like it's having several layers, yet it is basically a single layer. Okay, it's a single layer. The word pseudo means something that is actually false. Okay, so we find it in the respiratory tract, urinary tract, and it offers protection and provides is for secretion. Some of them can have the cilia that are important for moving materials and can also contain goblet cells. So we move to the second broad category of epithelial tissues, and that is the compound epithelium. Many layers. Here we're talking about many layers. So many layers, we have the first type is stratified epithelium. Okay, And stratified epithelium can take different types depending on the type of cells that you have. Is it simple? Is it stratified squamous, several layers, but the cells are irregular? Okay, that is stratified squamous. Sometimes it can be, these cells can actually be keratinized. This is to mean that they have keratin. The cells are actually containing keratin. Epithelial tissues that have keratin are usually for protection. So if you have, when we talk about compound epithelium, we're talking about epithelium that is mainly providing protection. Okay, protection. So stratified squamous is what we have just looked at. And then we have stratified cuboidal. That means there are several layers, but the cells have the shape of a cuboid. And this is found in many in large ducts of glands, such as the mammary glands. And then the third one is stratified columnar epithelium. Stratified columnar epithelium. This is to say that we have several layers, but these different layers are having cells that are columnar. So the second type of compound epithelial tissue is what we call transitional epithelium. With this, you have several layers of cells, that is obvious. But as you move from the basal surface towards the apical surface, the cells are changing in shape. The cells are changing in shape. And that is what we call transition epithelium. We find it in urinary bladder, ureter, and the parts of the urethra. This this type of epithelium is very important for resisting or for providing that expansion. Okay, it can easily actually expand. It allows organ expansion and prevents linkage because of the fact that the cells are having different shapes, they can actually stretch, but they are also impermeable to water. That's another property that they have. And then the last major broad category of epithelial tissue is what you call glandular epithelium. Here, we are talking about epithelial cells that can secrete, that have the function of secretion. Okay, these secretions come from the goblet cells. So this is to say that you have these epithelial cells, but between the epithelial cells, you have goblet cells that provide these secretions. Okay, we have two types of glands. Exocrine glands. These ones have what we call ducts. Okay, they have ducts, so they secrete via the ducts to the free surface. Okay, so we have the sweat gland, the digestive glands fall under that, and then the endocrine glands. This one secrete hormones, and they lack ducts. Okay, so that means that the hormones are secreted directly into the bloodstream. So what is the nature of the secretion? The different ways or the modes of secretion. And this is in relation to what happens to the cellular components when the secretions are being released. Okay? Merocrine is when the secretion, is where you have secretion without losing cell material or cell components. Then the secretions leave and the cell material is not lost. Okay, and then apocrine is the secretion with part of the cell shedding. Okay, the secretion go with part of the cell of the cell through what we call cell shading. Then halocrine is when you have secretion that involves the whole cell disintegrating. That means that if these secretions are produced, the cell also basically goes with it. Okay, and the example here is the sebaceous glands. So epithelial tissue is very important for many reasons. For you to remember the different functions of the epithelial tissue, just remember the different types. Ciliated epithelium, it moves the different material. Stratified epithelium provides protection, and also transition epithelium allows expansion of organs. And then you move to epithelium that have globulate cells. It means that they can be able to produce secretions. Okay. And then squamous epithelium, exchange of what? Of materials. Okay. And then we have the epithelium that has microvilli, very important for absorption. Okay, especially in the kidneys. So just remember the different types of epithelium, then you'll be able to come up with the different functions of the epithelial tissue. And then we have epithelia that has sensory cells. The skin has sensory cells. That means it's very important in picking information from the environment. Okay, so that basically marks the end of this presentation.